Welcome to this week's edition of Two Men in the Middle, where two men in the middle of the heartland pontificate about politics, news, and current events. I'm Brandon Kinnig.
I'm Craig Huey.
So, Craig, this last week has been the Trump show all over again. So let's start there. Trump making headlines, again, getting his name out in the media, broadcasting his imminent arrest and indictment, trying to grift off of it. And so the world waited breathlessly for this
that didn't happen.
Indictment to happen, which didn't happen, yeah.
Brandon, he only made like $1.5 million in money off of that announcement. So, I mean, for Trump, that's a pretty solid week-ish work of trading.
Not as much as those NFT trading cards, though, right?
Were those $99 and you got like a set of something?
They were. He actually made out very well.
I heard he made like over $5 million off of that, which again, I'm sorry, but if you can hear the sound of my voice and you bought one of those cards, you need to look around you and kind of take
think about that. That was all just based on
what
one or two posts that he did. I mean, and to make $5 million. I mean, not bad.
He just cut a little video.
Yeah.
Just think if he was on Twitter. He's back on Facebook now, but Facebook really isn't Trump's thing.
No.
What this week showed us is, again, that when Trump decides to, he can dominate a week's worth of news cycle like he did in the old days. But it has to be something in his wheelhouse. And victimhood and the state is coming for me. I'm going to be punished for all the good I did as president. The deep state won't let me be. There's no way they're going to let me run for a second term, which they took away from me anyway, and represent the good people of America again, because victim, 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 victim. So he got right back in his sweet spot. I don't really like this indictment out of New York. Trump has enough legal trouble coming in his future. There are enough things that have legitimate evidence and legitimate charges behind them coming out of Georgia, Mar-a-Lago, the J6 committee. Charges are coming for him. This one is the weakest of the 4 or 5 criminal cases that are potentially coming against him. And I can't explain this legally, but all I know is this state charge to be a felony relies on a federal charge that the Trump and Biden DOJ failed to bring. So This whole state charge of what he did with how he paid off Stormy Daniels, what Cohn paid her off, and then he paid him off out of his campaign funds, I believe, is the core of the argument here. To even make this charge, it's relied upon a federal charge that they didn't go ahead with. So this is weak tea by New York all the way around. Not saying he didn't do it. Not saying this isn't a crime. Not saying this is something that isn't even punishable. And we're going to go through some examples of times it has been punishable. But in the grand scheme of what everything Trump has done and what he's facing, I just don't think this is the one worth leading off with. I kind of agree with the folks that say either pull this back, take this off the table, let's see what happens. If for some reason you don't get the pound of flesh out of him legally that all Democrats are demanding, we can play this card at any time.
Yeah, this isn't the case in all cases.
No.
And as you said, it is the weakest. It's really kind of threading a needle to make this charge work. It doesn't mean that it can't be successful and a jury may not find him guilty. The only positive is that Michael Cohen is a pretty big witness, and obviously he's cooperating fully with
and has already gone to jail for the same crime.
He has, yeah. But as you said, this is also reaches back the furthest in time, because this is going back to
7 years.
the 2016 campaign before he was president. All of the other cases reflect his time in office, actual conduct and possible criminality that was done, alleged criminality, while he was still president. And those cases are much stronger. Particularly, I'm really more fascinated in watching the Fulton County case out of Georgia with the election tampering and interference there, which I think is stronger. And of course, you have the DOJ cases as well. And I have a lot of confidence in Jack Smith, the independent prosecutor who was appointed to handle that case, because this guy has grit. He knows his stuff. He prosecuted criminal cases in The Hague against war criminals. So this is a
picture
tough
of this guy.
Oh yeah,
he looks like a very serious dude.
He's serious, tough guy. Like, this is not a guy that'll be pushed around, right? Well, that's the thing, because that's been the knock against Merrick Garland, that he has been, hesitant. And
he's not the bulldog.
He's not the bulldog that is needed right now.
I think the case out of New York, people tend to fall into two camps. One is predominantly Democrat, where it's like Trump has played fast and loose with the rules and the law his entire life.
Yeah.
If you hang out with Trump long enough, you're going to get involved in criminality. If you tip over any rock in his past, you're going to find criminality. So I don't really care about the weakness of this charge or if there's some weird legal play back and forth of some theory of charging a crime in state that didn't get charged to a federal crime. I don't understand all of that, and I don't really care. I think most people who support this indictment will say he's a criminal. He's been a criminal for life. If it's not this, it'll be something else. Who cares? Let's just move forward with what we have and let the chips fall where they may. And I have to fight constantly not to fall into that category.
Right.
You can't just say, since Trump is a bad guy and been a bad guy his whole life, charging him with this is the same as charging him with something in Georgia or charging something out of J6. I think they're completely separate. And this is the one, in some ways, we're letting Trump kind of test out some of his strategies against these upcoming indictments. This is the one that he can honestly point to and say, you've got to be kidding me. So 7 years ago, I paid off a woman I had sex with to avoid some embarrassment to my wife. That's something that a lot of people can identify with. And I think a lot of people are saying, okay, this just doesn't make sense to go through all of this. What is going to be the end game? Trump is not going to go to jail. He's not going to be perp walked in an orange jumpsuit.
Yeah.
What are we really getting out of this except rubbing scratching that cathartic itch that Democrats have had for 7-8 years now about this guy and seeing him in jail? It will be satisfying if Trump does get arrested. There will be a little bit of my id that feels good watching him go into court. But after that, this case is going to go away, I think, very, very quickly after that.
I think so, too. And we didn't see an indictment this past week, so I assume if one's going to happen, it'll be this week. But there's also been speculation that...
And you think an indictment is coming at some time out of New York?
do. I think it doesn't get to this point, and this type of information doesn't get leaked unless an indictment is forthcoming. And at this point, it would be just disastrous to try to walk it back or to not indict when you come this far.
Yeah.
So I think it's coming. It's interesting because I think there is an argument to be made to have one of the stronger cases go first out of the gate, but that may not be the case. The MAGA crowd has really used this as a kind of a lightning rod to claim that there is no here, and that this is to make this a campaign finance issue. I mean, they've done everything from comparing this to Bill Clinton.
I mean, so Trump has done everything but come out and say, everybody grab a bat and go out and start beating on things.
Yeah.
He's done everything except say, it's time to get violent.
Well,
folks.
I mean, so he had this Truth Social post just the other day, March 24th, where he also said that potential death and destruction on such a false charge could be catastrophic for our country. So again, he's fanning those flames.
It's almost like he said, okay, so I didn't do it on the 6th. Watch this. I'll make sure I do it now.
Right. I mean, he called for protest before he made this even more direct inflammatory post. And I guess what gets me is what I find so frustrating is these Republicans that come out and say, this DA shouldn't be prosecuting because of what may happen, because of the country being torn apart. Well, again, let's be honest. The only reason that would happen is because you have a mass of people that have been led to believe a big lie. And elected Republicans are complicit in that because they refuse to push back and lean on that because they're afraid of that same base of voters. So instead, they just say, oh, this is bad because of what could happen. Well, how about you use your platform and actually say, hey, you've been lied to by this guy. We need to move on as a party. And instead, the party keeps falling back in this old trap of defending Trump. Whereas when these types of things, when they would arise, I mean, if you're not going to push back, then don't say anything at all. Instead, it's like deja vu, right? So there's this imminent announcement of charges forthcoming, and all of these Republicans step in line and start defending Trump and just calling out the prosecutor. It's back to the same old, and that's what enables Trump to play the victimhood card successfully, rally the base behind him, and pretty soon, we're back where we were in 2016, where he's rolling through the primaries. I mean, it's like we've learned nothing.
And it's the nature of this case and the nature of the DA's behavior is why Mitt Romney and middle-of-the-road Republicans they have to defend Trump by default on this. If I'm a Republican senator who wants to step out and speak out against Trump, this isn't the avenue to do it. Because there are so many problems with this case. If this were Georgia, I agree. I think you would see more Republicans say, hey, this is the line that I'm not crossing. This is obviously bad behavior. I'm going to say, no, we can't support this. But because of the behavior of the prosecutor, because of the nature of the law, the fact that it's dependent on a federal charge that wasn't there by Biden's DOJ, if I'm a Republican senator, I'm kind of in no man's land now. This is where Trump has put me. I can't come out. I don't want to come out and defend his actions or him, but I can't give any type of positive feedback or show any type of encouragement for what the DA in New York is doing. So I sympathize with Republican lawmakers that are doing this in some way, but this is also a beast of your making that we're entering the final stages of whatever the Trump life is going to be. And if he brings down the whole party with it, so be it. You've all have earned that, and that's just what it's going to happen.
Right.
But right now, if I'm a Republican, I'm almost forced to defend Donald Trump. And that's what he wanted, and that's what he got out of this week.
Yeah. But I think there's a difference between either saying nothing or giving a muted response versus coming out with something that's over the top, zealous, over defensive of who Trump is, and just going all out on the inflammatory rhetoric. With parroting what Trump does.
Do you listen to a lot of the Republican media entertainment wing? I mean, like Charlie Kirk and Hugh Hewitt.
Small doses. I follow bits and pieces.
Okay,
of it. Yeah.
So talking about what the proper Republican response should be, or the proper conservative response, there's a group of conservative media that have basically said Ron DeSantis ought to surround Mar-a-Lago and he should fight the extradition back to New York because, again, this is unlawful. This is political. Everybody knows there's no there there. This is 100% them victimizing Trump, trying to keep him from the nomination of the Republican Party. There is a slice of the base that you're going to be competing for. That's what you gotta. That's what you're That's what you're up against. I mean, that's ridiculous. There's no possible way DeSantis does anything to interject in an extradition of Trump.
Have we gone back in a time warp to 1950s Alabama with George Wallace? I mean, a sitting governor, fighting extradition, for a federal a criminal charge. Yeah. Like, no, that's not. That would be crazy. Again, it would be precedent setting, and DeSantis isn't going to do.
God, you said George Wallace. Just in that moment, he thought he was making history. In that moment, he thought he was on the right side of history. And just looking back at that now, you're right. How terrible that is. DeSantis is way too smart to get involved.
No, well, and he's already said he's not going to get involved when he's been asked about this. He's staying out of it, and so and he's done that while taking like pot shots at Trump as well, at the same time saying, well, I don't know about this business. I can't really relate to, the hookers and the...
Yeah, I thought that was pretty clever.
That was clever, yeah.
Listen, I know nothing about paying off hookers for sex, so right. I can't really stay in this.
And the great thing is, like, it's just enough because, any criticism, even mild like that, is enough to get Trump's ire, and Trump responds immediately because he can't help himself. Because
Do you think we'll see a big demonstration for Trump? Do you think we'll see? Because at some point, I think in the next 2 weeks, he'll get on a plane, he'll go to New York, he'll go into Manhattan's district's office, he'll get his picture taken, fingerprinted, and he'll plead not guilty, and he's out on ROR. I'm guessing is how this is going going to go.
If we do, I think we're likely to see one probably in Mar-a-Lago. I don't know that we'll see one in New York or near the courthouse. Now, there have been threats made. There was a white powder that turned out to be nothing that was sent to the DA. So there's going to be isolated things like that. And I think there's going to be more of that, especially as we get to trial stage. So that's only going to escalate, but I don't expect to see a huge demonstration in New York, like outside the courthouse or anything. They've already taken a lot of precautions, like the NYPD has been mobilized, and I think that's going to deter any of the big demonstrations that would, result in something crazy. But I could definitely see, like, them surrounding Mar-a-Lago and doing something akin to those, what they used to do on the water with the big boat.
Oh, I never thought about that. They got like a boat parade or a flotilla or something.
Yeah, the flotilla. They did something with vehicles too in the lead up to the 2020 election, if you remember, where they kind of took over one of the highways.
But when Trump gets on that plane to go to New York, he's going to truth out or contact the media to say, I'm headed to New York.
Oh, he's going to give them information every step of the way.
Now's the time. He is angling for some sort of large, let's say, ruckus protest.
He'll mobilize. Yes, he's going to do everything to tell them to mobilize. So, yeah, the question will be, in the aftermath of January 6th and, what's happened with those charges, if anybody's willing to go out on a limb, there's always going to be some people. So it's going to be a matter of, extent.
I mean, to close out Trump's behavior in this, he's having a big rally in Waco, Texas tonight on the anniversary that the government, the ATF, charged the Branch Davidians in Waco, burnt that place to the ground, I think by accident, but really should have known what they were doing. And I think some children died.
Oh, they did, yes. So it was very controversial.
You can't tell me Trump doesn't know the history of this date or doesn't know the history of that happened in Waco.
Well, of course he does. Again, he's just seizing this. Again, it fits into a paradigm for him of the deep state. Look at what they did to them. They can do that to you. What they're doing to me, they can do to you. When he first announced the news of his indictment, he said, they're not just coming after me, they're coming after you. It's that whole idea of conflating himself with the American people, with the state, which is what dictators do, especially fascist dictators.
Do you think he's going to reference what happened in Waco and reference it as state power run amok and link himself?
Oh, I expect him to do that because that's
that just dawned on me, but that's disgusting.
I'm sure he will link himself to what happened in Waco. Yeah, that's what I guarantee you that's what he's going to do. I would be shocked if he does not do that tonight. So I will definitely check on those remarks to see.
He's basically going to say the U.S. government is treating him like they treated the Branch Davidians in Waco.
Yes, and that what happened in Waco will happen again unless people rise up and do something about it. It'll be something. It may not be that direct, but it'll be veiled in terms of people need to rise up and stop this from happening again.
And I think I have my timeline right here, but if people have forgotten the Branch Davidians in Waco, a quick Google search will remind you of how crazy that got. Yeah. And I think you can draw a line from Ruby Ridge to Waco.
Was that 1993, I think?
It was sometime in the early 90s, 92, 93. Right. But
there's also a new Netflix documentary that just
on Waco,
dropped on that. That's supposed to be pretty good, which I haven't seen.
I think Michael Shannon plays the kooky dude.
Yeah, I forget
you're right. David Koresh.
David Koresh.
And that was a whole cult
leader.
There was, sex shit in there, there's always with the cult.
Yeah,
just a bad situation.
But there's widespread criticism, by the way, on how the government handled that, and that they were too fast, rushed in too fast. Obviously, there were children that died in that. They should have been much more cautious than they were. And so that is something that has, been, that was also something that mobilized the militia movement in the U.S. for many years, and it's been, so again, Trump is playing with fire, but his people know what they're doing with that. So
Yeah. God, it just dawned on me of how he is going to use that date and that location. And that's just going to be gross.
Oh, yeah.
And the last thing, but the big thing about Waco was, because I was in college during that time, and the debate was, why not just pull back?
Yeah.
They're in a compound in the middle of nowhere. Just let them be. Over the course of 3 months, they'll come out to go down, and you just arrest them. Why did we have to do that?
Well, and that's what everybody has said. But it was similar to what happened with the Ruby Ridge, right? There was a series of incidents like that where the government rushed in and and did wait. And granted, we haven't seen that type of strong arm, forceful response since then. Well, I would say the exception would be Elian Gonzalez when he was taken in Miami.
But even that was Clinton, right? That was a long time ago.
Well, yeah, but Waco and Ruby Ridge were under Clinton. That was Janet Reno, Attorney General at the time.
Yeah, that was.
Yeah.
What would happen if something like that happened today?
Oh, in today's media environment too, and with Fox,
it would just be.
Oh, it would be like a meltdown. It would be completely different than back then because of our news cycle and the internet and how that mobilizes and radicalizes people to respond. Yeah.
If you're looking for a catalyst that would have maybe national implications, an incident
that
would
ignite,
would be one of them.
That would be like a flame igniting.
So let's talk about, we identified 2 cases where a politician did something similar to what Trump is being accused of, was charged, and in both cases they actually went to trial.
Right.
One is Democratic hopeful favorite John Edwards.
Yeah.
For anybody to remember John Edwards, this was what?
John Kerry's
90.
No. John Kerry's VP nominee in 2004.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And then, but he ran for president, didn't he?
He did in 2008.
And this is where he got himself in trouble.
Right.
So John Kerry, if you Google John Kerry 2008, he's every Democrat's dream.
Right.
He's a good-looking young guy.
John Edwards, you mean? Not
John Edwards.
Yes.
Right. I'm sorry. John Kerry is not every Democrat's dream, and he's not a good-looking young man.
John Kerry lost,
I'm sorry.
by the way. But so, and for those of you who know, Democrats have won the popular vote in every presidential election since 1992, except John Kerry losing to George W. Bush in 2004.
There's nothing positive that excites you to vote about John Kerry. But John Edwards, he was the guy we wanted. Young guy, good-looking guy, trial lawyer, made a bunch of money off being a lawyer.
Right.
Speaks the part, looks the part. When Democrats whip up in a lab who we thought the country would respond to for being a Democrat for president in the 90s, it was John Edwards.
Handsome from the South. Everything going for him, except he's a complete piece of shit. Yeah.
John Edwards, during his campaign, hired, I believe, his mistress, or she became his mistress after she hired him. She was a documentary filmmaker.
Yeah, and
who was
photographer.
documenting his campaign, and he just happened to knock her up
an illicit affair
while his wife was battling cancer. And
didn't he not even acknowledge a child? Like, that was the whole thing.
Yeah.
He fought acknowledging there had to be a DNA test.
He paid off this woman to have her not go to the media and talk about this child in a very similar fashion that Trump did. He was charged with a very similar crime, went to jury, and it was a hung jury. So he didn't get convicted, but the jury could not decide if he was criminally liable for this payment or not. But that's one instance where high-level politician, head of high up at a party,
according to campaign
get charged with this.
Finance guidelines, though, he did have to pay an FEC fine.
Okay, so he did have to pay a fine for it.
Yeah, I want to say it was like $25,000, $30,000, something like that.
And I could see people sitting on that jury. If my dad were on that jury, this is a personal matter. It's $30,000. The payment wasn't much. The payment from Trump to Stormy Daniels was $130,000, which isn't a lot for Trump. What are we here for? I can see people taking that approach to that, but we bring out Edwards to show that there is precedent for people actually being charged with this during a campaign.
There is, yeah.
The other one is the Republican old Speaker of the House,
Dennis Hastert.
Hastert, okay, and Hastert. He actually molested some kids, I believe, before he became Speaker of the House.
House pages. So pages are almost like interns, but they basically run errands on the House floor for the members and the leadership. And so he had been accused of molestation of several of the House pages.
So he acted horribly inappropriate with these folks.
Right.
And in the process of paying them hush money, he did something illegal. He paid them out of the wrong fund, somehow tied to his office or his campaign. He was convicted and spent 13 months in jail for this. So there is.
He was never actually charged on the molestation charges, which again is a pattern that we see with the rich and powerful that get off on the most egregious charges. Yes. Instead, they get booked on kind of like the mafia, right? Mafia would always get booked on money laundering.
Al Capone going to jail for tax evasion.
Tax evasion, that's what it was. Tax evasion, not money laundering. Instead of the actual underlying more significant crimes.
But this is a great point. They didn't charge him with the underlying crime. Where he got himself in trouble is how he paid the hush money.
Yes.
And that's what they took him to court on, indicted him, and I believe he spent 13 months in jail. Now, he probably spent 13 months in jail because the judge, he admitted to the molestation of the pages. I'm sure they may have rolled a little bit of that into maybe the maximum sentence they can give with him. But again, this is a charge that has a history of being recognized, identified, and people have been indicted.
It's not novel,
It's not completely novel.
So you hear MAGA people comparing this to Bill Clinton lying under oath about his affair. Those are apples and oranges.
It's not the same thing.
Right. It's not the same thing. And the whole Bill Clinton investigation happened as part of a impeachment trial in Congress, which wasn't a criminal trial in terms of the way that went. But it's not, that's not an accurate comparison. The two we identified are.
Where this is important, I think, to move forward is I used to think that before somebody ran for president, they sat down and made an inventory of all the bad shit they've done, knowing that I've got to solve some of this before I go, or let me look at this and make an honest decision. Is this worth running? Because you got to know everything is coming to the surface.
You really think they do that?
No, they don't.
No, they don't.
They don't. I think they used to. I don't think they do anymore.
Yeah, I think you underestimate the hubris of many of these people that just believe that they are owed the presidency or that they deserve it. The nation needs me. So no, they don't do that because they don't see it as a problem and they don't have the foresight to put it.
True.
It's inconvenient, let's put it that way, to consider it. And it would cause them to pause and to reassess. And they don't want to do that. They're focusing on the nation needs me. I deserve this.
Well, don't you think they
deserve me?
To the death of accountability that we talked about last week.
Oh, absolutely.
He knows. Everybody knows. I can explain that away. It won't be a problem. I'm trying to think back through who was Donna Rice. That was Gary Hart who sunk him, right?
Yeah, that was 1988.
80 something, and she sat on his lap. And did they have an affair, or was there just an alleged affair?
No, they did have an affair. Okay, it was funny because his boat wasn't his boat. The Monkey Business.
Yes,
was out the one. Yeah,
and there's a great picture of him she's sitting on his lap on that boat, and after that, it's done.
So was that? It was either 84 or 80. I can't remember if that was when Reagan's second term, 84. Was that Bush Senior 88 that he was running?
I think this was 88.
Okay.
And maybe, again, I am stuck in a nostalgia loop. Nostalgia, my definition, I'm longing for a time that never existed. Yeah. I guess I just like to think maybe that one of the things that could happen if we started charging people with more of this, we would force people to take an examination of their behavior and examine, do I really, really want to run for the highest office in the world?
Right.
And that I think maybe at some point in time in our history, people were discouraged because they had those types of things in their past.
And maybe that type of self-awareness and self-introspection would filter down to, Senate, governor races.
Maybe.
And we would have less instances of, having people like Herschel Walker and Georgia and others who had no business running, but literally didn't care because they're like, this isn't going to hurt me.
I guess that's what I'm trying to get to. Don't you think maybe I'll go back a few decades. Don't you think in the 60s and 70s, or we'll just throw it wide open, was there ever an era when a politician would do what you just said? Hey, I'm looking through what I've done, how this is going to play, and I'm just taking myself out of consideration.
I don't know. I mean, I would think to a greater degree than we have now. I can say at least I think in previous eras you would have people near them and people in their own party that would hold them accountable much more than we have now because we're so polarized that both parties are just popularity clubs for their members essentially. I mean, all they do is take the line of their candidate, whereas before you would have people that would stand up. But the parties, if you go back to the 40s, 50s, 60s, and even 70s, were much more diverse. Each party had a coalition. You had conservative Democrats, you had liberal Democrats, you had liberal Northeast Republicans and moderate Republicans. And so that diversity enabled there to be diversity of thought, more accountability. And now you don't have that because the parties are so ideologically, sound. I mean, there's no difference there.
I think you're right, and I think you just explained that to me, is we shouldn't expect the individual candidate to do that type of examination with themselves.
We need others around them to
because you're right.
do
People
that.
who will run for president will always come up with a reason why existentially the universe needs me.
And most people like that need others to ground them. They need others to
and that's what the parties
bring them back
used
down
to
to earth. Yes.
Hey, we know you want to, we know you can, but you can't because of X, Y, and Z.
Right.
And I think that's what's been kicked out.
And that was the whole basis behind having the smoke-filled rooms, which were lambasted, but now look not so bad in light of what we've seen over the last several years.
The smoke-filled room would never have given you Marjorie Taylor Greene.
No, not at all. Who
was the governor for New Mexico? Richardson? In the 80s. Remember this guy? He was a big Clinton guy.
Yeah, so that was Richardson. He became U.S. ambassador.
Yes.
Yeah.
The rumor always was, because I always wanted him to run for president, the rumor always was he had so much shit in his closet, he made Clinton look like a choir boy. And they had told him, hey, following Clinton, there is no way we can give you the nomination because all of this is going to come out and the country is just exhausted from Clinton. I guess we've learned to not be exhausted by just taking this off the table and ignoring it and saying it doesn't matter, I guess, anymore.
Yeah, I mean, because once upon a time it would have mattered, and and like we've talked about with Gary Hart, there's many others as well. Campaigns collapsed under those types of revelations, and today, I mean, we just shrug at them. And you can look at it on presidential level, but again, I go back to Herschel Walker. Like, I mean, there was once upon a time when everything had surfaced about Herschel Walker, that would have been enough. And I mean, he would have had no standing, and none of that.
Did you see Lindsey Graham got an ethics violation?
I did see that, yes.
For like 5 times he was asking money for Herschel Walker while in a federal building, which is a no-no.
No, you can't do that.
You can't
and
do
again, that seems like it shouldn't be notable, but it is, because the ethics committee has been so weak in the last several years. And this is the frustration with Congress, right? They police themselves. So their ethics committee that's staffed by their own members, they can choose to staff it or not to staff it, which they have at different periods in history.
Yeah.
And there's such a lack of accountability. That's a big thing with campaign finance right now. So the FEC doesn't have full voting majority right now. Mm-hmm. So technically they can't even have hearings and bring charges against candidates. And Congress is in no rush to fill those open seats because they don't want their own members investigated.
Yeah.
I mean, it's ridiculous.
And there is no more stigma for rich guy cheating on wife, right? There are no more.
I think that's kind of baked.
Maybe we make it bigger. Are there any more moral concerns that would bump a candidate out of consideration? I can't.
No, I mean, no. Well, I mean,
moral
concerns have taken a backseat to political power. It's about the raw numbers. So
true.
I mean, Dana Loesch, who's with the NRA, had made a comment during the Herschel Walker.
Yes, I
scandals,
that.
Saying that she didn't care if he had aborted, the 5,000 bald eagle babies or something, like, as long as he was in the Senate and we got the numbers we needed. That's all she cared about.
As long as he votes who I want,
that's all.
We just don't care.
Nothing else matters,
So that's just another thing we can throw in the scrap heap of there is no more moral test. There are no moral questions to answer. If you give me power, so be it. That's what we're going to go with, and we'll just live with and excuse everything else.
Right. And I mean, and there's not even like a basic modicum, and you don't have to get into sexual morality, because obviously that's always been an issue with candidates going back to the beginning of time. But what about just telling the truth and just, being able to, execute campaign finances correctly? I mean, there's basic responsibility there that we've thrown out the window.
Yeah.
And if we're going to accept that politicians don't have to ever tell the truth and they can lie about everything, then we're only contributing to the breakdown of our system and this just, universal notion that universal distrust that we have, right, in our political system. And the irony is people like Trump have gained prominence based on that, by saying, well, the whole system is corrupt, your politicians lie to you. He's doing the same thing, and he's continually growing in that. But he's also leveraging that to his advantage, like the just complete breakdown and distrust in the system. And what people don't realize is, comparisons to other political systems, Vladimir Putin has been so successful in consolidating power in Russia since the early 90s. With that same thing, with his media conglomerate, he puts all this stuff out there and he causes people to distrust everything, right? So it's gaslighting at a maximum. And then people just get exhausted and they tune out everything because they're like, I can't believe anything anymore. I don't care. I really don't care if this politician is corrupt, because they're all corrupt. It's that whataboutism. And that's what you see with Trump's defenders, right? Well, what about Clinton? What about? And so there's no nuance in terms of saying, well, this is different, or this may be more severe. It's just they're all bad, so we don't care either way.
And Trump is like a political experiment that would take 50 years condensed into 8.
Yeah.
Because he introduced so much different, so many norms were broke, so many things that used to matter didn't matter. Then we went through his presidency. The presidency itself, from a policy and from just what happened, was fairly uneventful. We didn't go any big wars until you hit 2020, of course, with the pandemic. But the first 3 years of his presidency just looked like every other Republican presidency almost.
And in terms of governing and policy, with the exception of norms being broken, because I think if you look at it from the prism of norms broken and precedents set along with that, those 4 years were like a decade in terms of all that happened.
But now we immediately get we immediately get some feedback on what the American population politically thinks of all of this change, because the guy who did it, and if he gets back in, will do what he did from change and norm breaking times 100, is right back up to be revalidated and re-put back in the office.
Yeah.
Nobody, his own party hasn't told him no. Nobody has said you have disqualified yourself by the things you have done. Now it's going to be time again for the American people, I guess, to render a verdict on what they think of that.
What the word that sticks out to me in recent weeks that Trump has said, in terms that gives us complete visibility into how he would act in office, retribution.
He sees
retribution. This as, taking out revenge on his political enemies. He's already talked about signing this executive order that would wipe clean the federal bureaucracy of the public servants and replace them with his own political cronies at, every level, every government agency. That's his MO. So that's what we would get with Trump 2.0.
I always ask anybody who talks about Trump this question. Who is Trump's attorney general? You tell me.
Yeah.
Who under Trump would take on the highest legal role in the United States? Who's his Secretary of State? What does his cabinet look like?
Because, think about it this way. All of the A-level, B-level people were fired.
And C-level people are gone.
So all you have now are kind of the bottom-of-the-barrel hacks, the people that literally have no experience doing any of this, that are just going to be complete yes men and women. That's all that's left.
Well, I guess the only thing that stops Trump is the second topic we wanted to talk about. Ron DeSantis had a little bit of a soft launch kind of this week. He's stepping into the spotlight a little bit more. It didn't go 100%, I think, of how DeSantis wanted his first initial volley into the campaign to go.
Yeah, no, it was rough. It wasn't seamless. There, the timing wasn't good for him, as we discussed with Trump coming out talking about his indictment. It was already botched based on his Ukraine position that he took last week with Tucker Carlson.
It's not a territorial dispute. That's not at all what that is. And he's flipped a little bit on that too.
He has. So he admitted this week in an interview with Piers Morgan that Putin is a war criminal and a really bad guy. So he tried to again. And this is why he has placated nobody, because he tried to attempt to walk that back, although he really didn't. Like he still has espoused a strong position on Ukraine being in the vital interest at all, other than just admitting the obvious. Putin has committed war crimes, but that was enough for some of the hard right MAGA folks to then be upset because they think that he is vacillating on Ukraine and not taking the position that Trump is taking. So he really has nobody happy with his position on Ukraine right now. And taking that and going that direction in the interview with Piers Morgan just a week after his comments with Tucker Carlson, people are saying he's trying to play it both ways.
Yeah. And in the week that Trump got indicted.
Of all times.
Interview there. I was listening to a podcast this week. I forget which one it is, but they gave a little bit of the history of President Scott Walker's presidential campaign. And
Scott Walker.
One of the things they talked about, Scott Walker, for everybody to know, that's a Republican governor from Milwaukee.
Who at one point polls were touting that he was going to be the next president.
Landslide.
Yeah.
Just give him the nomination. We're good to go. Walker was young. He was articulate. He was what a lot of he was like our John Edwards. He's what a lot of people were saying. That's who we want. The thing that really got Walker in trouble is he tried to articulate a position on immigration. And instead of saying, as the governor of Wisconsin, immigration is not something that we deal with on a daily basis like they do in Arizona and Texas, and staking out a center-right, middle-of-the-road, defendable, kind of almost vanilla policy on immigration, Scott decided he was going to really show his chops. He was going to show his understanding on immigration, an issue that he really wasn't comfortable speaking with, had no history of speaking with. Scott Walker got himself so wrapped up around the topic of immigration, he proposed building a wall between the United States and Canada. And he just kept talking. He kept talking to the point where he came out against natural born citizenship, which I think would require a constitutional change to wipe out. My point here being is sometimes as a governor, when you make that step to the national stage, you have to talk about topics that you're not familiar with. You don't have an established talk track, and not everybody in your state just looks at you like a seal, flapping and nodding and telling you how great it is. And that has derailed several governors.
Yes.
DeSantis didn't quite do that to himself, but he's following some of that same path.
Oh, completely. And the difference is, like, you can't run too far to your base, to the extreme of your base, because you have to win the general and you have to win those voters in the middle. So Scott Walker basically ruined his campaign in the primary.
Yeah.
DeSantis is trying to win the primary, but may still lose it. But even if he wins it, he's doing it to the detriment of being able to win a general election because he's staking out positions that are so far on the spectrum. And that's what he has to realize because, again, when you're looking at Trump, when you're looking at DeSantis, you look at those states that Biden won, and you look at those states last year and the congressional elections that remain blue. Like, you have to appeal to that middle and to those moderate disaffected Republicans that voted blue last year. And what DeSantis and what Trump are doing are not keys to winning formula to getting those voters back.
And I think what DeSantis maybe is kind of starting to learn is that you don't have to have a position on everything, but you need to pick the 2 or 3 things that are important to the base and the primary. You need to have those answers down cold. Right. The one lesson DeSantis and everybody needs to learn from Trump, there is an order of operations here. You win the primary first. Do not care about the general election, because if you don't get through the primary, you don't have a chance to get to the general election. And I think DeSantis is trying to thread some needles about the general election that Trump knows. It's the base. It's the excitement of the base. It's winning the primary. DeSantis may, in trying to give the perfect answer or to tackle a variety of positions, he may not excite the base the way that Trump knows how to, and he can't get through the primary. Trump is a candidate built for the primaries.
Yeah.
DeSantis looks like to me, I don't know if he can get through that or not.
Well, and DeSantis has the misfortune of having a past record as a member of the House that he has to confront.
Which we haven't even really gotten into yet.
No, and Trump is exploiting that likely successfully in states like Iowa, like, you know, his record on wanting to roll back entitlements like Medicare and Social Security, and his position on ethanol, which is a big deal in Iowa. So even things that are more state level like that, Trump is exploiting, and those could hurt DeSantis. And the interesting thing is Trump has been a political animal in terms of an anomaly in that Trump can change positions all day long, and voters don't seem to hold him accountable for that. But that doesn't apply to DeSantis. DeSantis is facing scrutiny.
He's the only politician in my lifetime who's able to say,
only
these
one.
rules apply to you, none of it applies to me.
Yep.
It's actually seen as a negative if you attack me.
The only thing I can think of, the only reason that people allow that is because he comes from outside the political system, and for some reason people give him a pass on that because they don't see Trump as a politician.
Yeah.
Even though he's been president now for 4 years, he's still not seen as a politician. And so he gets away with that where people like Marco Rubio and Ted Cruz
just
and
can't
DeSantis,
do it.
None of them can. They are scrutinized. They're held responsible. They get ostracized for their flip-flops, and they are defeated because of them by the same voters who hold them responsible, but not Trump.
And Trump has mildly painted a picture of DeSantis' future for him by saying, hey, Ronnie, down there, I know you might think this is really funny, my $130,000 problems with the porn star, but don't you worry about it. I'm going to dig something up on you. You have a very nice, attractive wife. She's in play. Oh, and by the way, here's a picture of you with some teenage girls as a teacher. Just we're not going to fully blat, but just here's a preview.
Several
of
times
what your next year looks like.
Insinuated, with those. So these, so back in his 20s, DeSantis taught for a brief time, which I didn't know until recently.
Yeah,
he was a teacher, and there's videos of him with young girls and students of his, and they look like they're partying, and so those are the photos where
Queensberry rules don't apply to you, Ron.
Right.
You're gonna get it. And Trump has already said maybe there's a guy in your future. Or no, what? I'm sorry, I goofed that up. Trump was saying you'll learn about this when your past comes out. Your troubles with women, or maybe men. Just casually throwing out there that DeSantis may have some sort of male gay sex scandal. It is
past affair.
Just to let you know, if you thought you knew the bar was low, you have no idea.
Oh, and can't you imagine that Trump would his people would go seek out some of these girls where they are now, get them up on a platform, do an interview, a press conference. Remember when Trump, his first debate with Hillary, he brought the Clinton
the most
women,
disgusting, masterful stroke I've ever seen,
and put them in the front row of the audience. He'll do the same thing with DeSantis. He'll bring them and put them in the front row of the audience.
I still believe DeSantis is not running for the president. I will believe DeSantis is running for president.
He's young enough he can afford to wait.
The day the Florida state legislation changes the law in Florida that he does not have to resign as governor to run for president. because he has to resign from Florida the day he announces. He is basically
which they can still
not
do.
The governor anymore.
Yeah.
He's done. He is no longer the governor. The thing that has put him in this position, the red wave of Florida that he created, the wokeism, woke goes to Florida to die, that all of that's him is done the day he runs for president, announces his run for president. And he's never going back to it because he's termed out now as governor. So he is basically a man, he has put himself on an island. It's president or bust. I don't know if Ron wants to do that. Now, if he can convince the Florida legislation to change the law, which he can.
I mean, that shouldn't be hard. They're kind of like a rubber stamp legislature. They do whatever he wants, basically.
Is that a good look for him?
Yeah, not so much, no.
So you're too much of a puss to run, knowing, hey, it's all or nothing.
Yeah, he looks like he's not willing to commit fully.
Ron DeSantis is not in a great position to run.
It reminds me of that weak moment against Charlie Crist in the governor debate where Crist, directly confronted him about running for president, and he refused to give an answer. Remember, he just awkwardly sat there in silence and made a little smile.
I say it again. He beat Charlie Crist by 20 points. Brandon, you could take him by 12. I could take him by 8. He's the most hated politician in Florida. Still have not seen anything with Ron yet that says he's running.
Right. That was not a race. So he was up against a very weak candidate to begin with. And Florida, the rest of the country is not Florida. Florida is a unique political environment. There's nothing to suggest that DeSantis has national appeal beyond Florida.
I haven't seen it.
To win some of these states. I'd like to see that because I don't see that either.
And the average age in Florida is what? 100?
Right.
It's the oldest state, I believe. It has to be the oldest state.
It's up there, yeah.
It's full of old Republicans that will vote Republican just on automatic.
Yeah.
So I don't know if DeSantis is this juggernaut that some people think he's going to.
No, because, Florida, even, demographics isn't representative of the rest of the country because of that.
No.
So,
a lot of the woke stuff, where woke goes to die, that's not going to play in parts of the country. I'm still convinced that DeSantis isn't running. He didn't show me anything this week that shows me he's put in any prep work or is preparing himself to run.
Well, and if he doesn't run, then it begs the question, who is the single alternative to Trump in a Republican primary? Because there isn't anybody else that...
Is there one now?
No.
Nikki Haley?
There isn't, yeah.
Tim Scott, he's not going to announce, is he? Scott, Pence, Pompeo, they're not going to run, are they?
They probably, Pompeo, some of these people will just because they're deluded, right?
Yeah.
They have this grandiose notion of they should be president. But in terms of them taking off, no. You're talking about Meyer down in single digits. I don't see any one of them that could win.
And they have no path. There's no path to excitement over Mike Pence being
not at
the
all.
president of the United
Mike
States.
Pence doesn't have a lane. That is the most delusional candidacy of all of them.
Yeah.
He has no support among any faction of the party. So where or how he thinks he could even get any momentum is
what party is he running for?
No
clue.
It's insane. But again, it gets back to what we've talked about, these politicians that just pay consultants to tell them what they want to hear and that have these just notions that the country deserves me at this moment.
So basically everybody needs, I was going to say my grandma would have been a great political consultant because she would have told you exactly where you were and what you were doing.
Yeah.
You suck. You're not going to win. You're out of money. This is a vanity project. You should quit.
Every one of them needs somebody like that.
Everybody needs to tell that. There was a rare moment of bipartisanship in Congress this week where they halted the CEO of Tik Tok and everybody got to take 5 to 7 minutes of beating the shit out of that guy.
Yeah, and I only saw clips. I didn't get to go back and watch the whole hearing, but apparently it was a disaster, so he did not come across well.
It's a pretty hard lift to ask somebody to say, hey, they are geared up for this. The Congress, they've been waiting on this. You're going to be a bipartisan whipping post. There's nothing you can do except take it.
Well, and there's the federal government has already basically said federal employees have to take TikTok off their phones. Many states have done the same. I don't know if Missouri has. I know Kansas did.
I think Missouri did too.
Action. There is inherent vulnerability with the TikTok app because it is based in China and the Chinese Communist government has access anytime. They can just say, we want this data and go and
Brandon, as this guy explained to me, it's in a data center in America.
It can't be accessed in China at all, right? There's nothing that's,
it's on your land, right? That gives you, it was a complete shit show.
Yeah, and there's already been indications. There was a former FBI agent retired who came out and she said that they already have evidence that the Chinese government has at different times accessed data, TikTok data, and
Absolutely.
batches here and there.
Yeah.
And then they even believe there's, Americans' data has been accessed at different times. So it's an inherent security risk vulnerability. It's something we have to figure out. And I mean, there's really two options here. Either TikTok is banned in the United States, or they are forced to completely sell to an American subsidiary like Apple or Google or Meta or something like that, where it's entirely based here and it's completely separated from the Chinese entity. That's the only option, really.
And there is precedent for that.
Yeah.
There's an app that was started by an American VC company, became successful. It was a social app. They sold it to a Chinese company. The United States government stepped in and said, because of the nature of the social interactions of this app, we have a national security concern. We think that the Chinese government could access this data, look for people of certain positions, either in politics or economic or culture, and could have influence over them by what they do on this app. And they forced the sale of this app back to an American company. Brandon, what app am I speaking of? Got a guess?
No, I'm drawing a blank. Which
Grindr.
one? Oh, okay.
Grindr is a gay men's dating app. And they basically said, the nature of the interactions on here, somebody could be blackmailed or held over them if that data ever got out, and they forced the sale.
So that started as a Chinese app?
No, it was an American app.
Oh,
they sold it to a
China.
Chinese company, and the government forced them to sell
it back. Interesting. So
That
there's
makes
precedent.
sense.
And it's not an app, but there's also, what was the phone company?
Huawei.
Huawei.
Yeah.
Remember? Because that was another one that got banned in the United States because of the ability of the Chinese to compromise that hardware tech. So when you're talking about technology, whether it's hardware or software, like there is precedent for this. So the other thing I want to highlight is I spend a lot of time beating up on Republicans, and deservedly so, especially in this era and the anti-democratic nature of everything. But I was really just had to roll my eyes repeatedly, sickened by the protest, pro-TikTok protests on Capitol Hill. You had a handful of very liberal Congressman Jamal Jackson, I think, from New York.
Yeah, some younger folks.
And they basically turned this into, said it's not a security risk. This is just it's xenophobia. The fact that they oppose China, and you actually had like some of these TikTok influencers crying, saying, this is how I express myself. Like I can't imagine living without TikTok. I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. Like you will find another platform. There's many out there. TikTok wasn't around 8 years ago.
Yeah,
I mean, we all survived. Like this is not end of the world. And I mean, talk about like first world like problems and mix up in priorities when you're unable to see the forest for the trees. Like here's an inherent security vulnerability that could have an impact on literally peace in the world and world war, and you're all caught up in your own just self-expression in terms of using this app. I have no sympathy for that. It's ridiculous. And the fact that TikTok paid airfare and hotel to bring all these people out here. I mean, come on. Like, give me a break.
Yeah. I don't buy any of that at all. So bipartisan things typically can happen one of two ways. One of them is when there's a good that needs to be done, and everybody wants in on getting credit for doing the good.
Yeah.
The second is when something has to be done that's so bad, nobody wants singular blame for it. Biden is not by executive order going to ban TikTok.
No.
It's 150 million users, predominantly in the younger base that they're going for. He is not going to be the sole bad guy. Congress, this is going to take a bill through Congress that Biden supports.
Right.
The system is going to have to work as designed to spread out the blame, the consensus for this. Because if Biden did an executive order wiping out TikTok, he's going to take a hit. Well, there's no way around that.
Didn't Trump attempt to do that as well by executive order?
He made some talk about it, but I don't think he ever really seriously
I don't know. That's what I can remember if it was ever proposed, but I don't think I think the legality would be suspect anyway. It will go through a lot of court cases by executive order. It needs to come from Congress.
Yes. This needs to be a law. Everybody needs to be on the same page. Everybody in government needs to be a grown-up and say, hey, we know this might hurt some folks. I get it. It's entertaining, but we're taking this off here. We're taking this away.
We will survive. Other apps will come. And again, the nature of technology, apps come and go. I mean,
it's just or China. Just give us your version of TikTok.
Yeah,
you can only be on it for 45 minutes. It's mostly math, science, and history.
And by the way, China has never played by these rules. China does not allow Facebook. They do not allow Twitter because they don't allow open expression. They, from day one, have banned our American-made apps because they want to have tight control of communications. So the idea that somehow we are acting out of line when every step of the way they have tried to create a world where their version of everything is the only version that gets through to their own citizens. They've never played by the rules. And so finally, it's time for us to push back against something that is a security dilemma.
And what we're really pushing back against is that it's a foreign country that owns this data.
Right. They have complete access. It's a foreign country that is hostile, that has made that has been made clearer.
Now,
recently.
If an American company owns that data and uses it to invade your privacy, we're all fine with that. My point here is it has nothing to do with the amount of data, the amount of intrusion of
what
TikTok.
The company can collect. It's about the government.
It's about who is using
the government accessibility.
If
of that
this
data.
were just Zuckerberg or somebody else, and we're just using it to make billions, we would support that. That's totally fine.
Yeah,
because we've all given up privacy, and we're past that. We don't care. We've already made that deal.
We've selected convenience out of privacy. Yeah,
we are privacy. The product, and as long as things remain free, we're absolutely, totally fine with that.
Right.
It's just TikTok is going to get banned. I don't think there's any way. Any way around that.
I think it's going to happen.
And I think it has to happen.
And I think, especially after that hearing this week, it's even more likely because that CEO did nothing to quell the concerns.
There's no version of a CEO I think that could do good in that meeting. No. He just took it. But to your point, he responded sharply. I don't know how to say this without having it sound terribly xenophobic. They should have sent an American from the company.
Yeah, because the CEO is Singaporean. Yeah,
but Americans don't draw distinction between Chinese, Singapore. It is what it is. Just from a sheer marketing perspective, I think TikTok knows this ban's coming. I think they've been told, and I think they kind of put on the appropriate defense, knowing that the fix is already the fix is already in. Now, you were in your Creighton stuff today.
Yes, I'm excited. So Creighton beat Princeton last night by 11 points, and so we're going to our
smart kids played smart kids.
Yes, first Elite Eight ever, technically, unless you count 1941 when we were in a different conference and we were not in Division I. So, for all intents and purposes, it's our first Elite Eight.
Gotcha.
So I'm very excited. We're playing San Diego State tomorrow. It should be a really good game. If we win that game, we're in the Final Four. Yeah.
That's insane that you guys one win away from being in the Final Four.
Oh, my gosh, yeah.
Creighton's
I'm so
a small
excited.
School, isn't it?
It is. So about 6,000 undergrads, 4,000 grad students. So, small.
Traditional Catholic Jesuit education school.
Jesuit liberal arts education. You know, the one thing I remember, which I look back on now and enjoy, at the time I was kind of like, this is too much. The core curriculum was so much. Like you had to take math, you had to take science, you had to take art, you had to take religion, like all of this, because they want you to be well-rounded. And it seems like a nightmare when you're an undergrad, but like looking back on it, like I really liked having that exposure to kind of everything. And so that's part of the Jesuit
and Creighton's education. The only college. You didn't go to graduate school, am I correct?
No, I haven't. So I do want to go back and get my master's.
The only reason I ask is I went to McKendree, which is a small school like Creighton. Academically, it was a bitch. I mean, it was, like you said, multiple
That's how
classes.
Creighton was, yeah.
It was every class had a 20-page paper. No tests were multiple choice. You got 5 questions on a board, 6 blue books, 2 hours. Do what you.
I remember the dreaded blue books.
Write to the point where you just cannot write anymore. I got to grad school at Southern Illinois, which was a publicly. It was a joke.
Completely different.
Academically, the small private school just blew it out of the water. I could not believe. I was a TA. Some of the things that they were doing in undergraduate school, I'm like, guys, this isn't even high school work.
Right.
I was amazed at how far ahead the private school was from the state school.
Yeah.
Now, I got one kid graduate from private school, one kid go to state school. I guess we could put them in competition together and see which one does the best. But private Jesuit education is still pretty good.
It's still pretty good, yeah. I mean, Creighton's a high academic profile, one top schools in the Midwest, ranked very high. And they used to be ranked by U.S. News as a regional school. Now they're in the tier of national schools for a high academic standing, which is kind of cool. I mean, they attract people from all over the country. And kind of a fun fact, which people don't know, is that we have one of the highest populations of Pacific Islanders of any school in the country, because we're one of the only schools that actually sends reps to Hawaii specifically to advertise and to recruit. So we have a very large population of Hawaiian Islanders. And one thing I remember very fondly, every year on campus, they would have a luau, and their families would come over from Hawaii and cook Hawaiian food and do this whole big thing. It was a lot of fun. But
Creighton's in Iowa, right?
No, Omaha, Nebraska.
Oh, Nebraska.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, yeah, just a few hours
2 hours north of here, you're good to go. Yeah. I know this is another old man rant, and this is like the third time I've waxed back to yesterday was so much better than today. But the NCAA tournament has absolutely been destroyed. And I say that because I grew up with tournaments of the 80s and 90s. The 90s Duke team that had, Christian Laettner, Bobby Hurley, Grant Hill, college teams that had 3 and 4 seniors, kids that were 21, 22 years old. I mean, actually developing into adults. The UNLV teams that had Stacey Augmund, Larry Johnson. My point being is that before all of this one and done, before all this G League stuff, before you could go to Europe and make a living playing, kids actually went to college for 2 and 3 years. There's a reason why a 16 seed, it took, 30 years or 25 years or whatever before it finally happened?
Yeah.
No 16-year-old seed was beating one of those blue bloods. When you look at, we'll take it college sports, Brandon, but when you look at college sports, do you root for the underdog or do you root for the dynasty?
I typically root for, it depends. I mean, typically root for the underdog, although I'm more cautious in my brackets. I tend to, and that didn't go well this year.
There's personal pride on it. You always got to say underdog.
Right. But I think there's something to be said for that. And so, I mean, this year, especially with the number of upsets, I mean, it's just, are there any teams left that you're rooting for at this point? I mean,
well, I like, people get mad at me, but I like the Yankees. I like the Cowboys. Yeah. I don't want to see the one team beat the good team. I want to know, how far can the good team go? How good is the good team? Are we talking just this year good, next year good? That attracts me way more than the underdog. So for
dynasty
me,
over the underdog,
there's not a lot of teams in this bracket or this tournament anymore that I root for, because you can make a hero, a villain out of each one of these teams. The UNLV team in the 90s that were loaded with pros with Tarkanian, they were the villains of the tournament.
Yeah.
They had the old guy who was obvious the cheater, used to bite on the towel all the time and just sweat. That was a great team to follow. They had character, they had great players, and the players had all been there 2 and 3, 4 years. And you just don't get that anymore. Things change so fast. Players are out so fast.
Yeah, it is different. Yeah, different.
Even like Duke, who used to hold on to their players more. A lot of those kids are one and done, because you just have to play that way in order to win. And as you probably know from Creighton, they demand winning. There is no, even at a private Catholic college, it's great that you're pumping out men that are ready to face the world and educated, all of that. But we also got to win some basketball games from time to time.
That's right.
That's just, everybody falls under that category anymore.
Yeah, I mean, they do cycle out much faster now. As
well,
far as players
this tournament hurts small schools too, because now the expectation, if Fairleigh Dickinson, which they're based out of New Jersey, I think, or something.
I think that,
they were the 390th team in the league, but they got in on a technicality. If they can beat Purdue, well, the expectation now is everybody should be able to beat the big boys. So
yeah.
College basketball is not what it used to be. Not saying it's worse, but it's definitely different than when I was a big fan in the in
There
the
is
90s.
something though that's fun about just a total unpredictability right now. The
True.
fact that I mean, it's just like everything that like that was forecasted just went out the door. Like there's something just kind of fun about that.
Have you ever been to Vegas?
Yeah.
Okay.
A couple times, yeah.
We were in Vegas
more
this
than a few
week,
times.
and during the March tournament, it's the best time to go. We watched
with all the betting that's going on?
We watched the K-State Michigan State game at a sports book and watched like 25 dudes. Half of them had to be Michigan State grads. Just grown men, just throw themselves on the ground, screaming,
I bet
shouting.
that was a sight to see, yeah.
Because you're mixing, this is my team, and now I have a large dollar amount based on this team too.
Yikes.
Really gets people excited, let's say. It's fun to watch.
That would be fun to see, yeah.
Yeah, Vegas was pretty fun, but...
Always good for a weekend trip, yeah.
It's 3 days, and you got to get out. You can't spend farther than that.
Yeah.
Brandon, do we have anything interesting to talk about? Or are we done with our hour?
I think that may be it.
We're still getting back into the
groove of things,
the groove here. And it does take a little bit of time to get back into it.
Yeah, it really does. I think we're getting there.
We'll get there. That's our hour. Thanks, Brandon.
Thanks, Craig.
Thanks for listening to 2 Men in the Middle. Make sure to give us a 5-star review wherever you get your podcasts. Check out our website at 2meninthemiddle.com. Drop us an email at 2meninthemiddle@gmail.com or tweet at us at 2 Men in the Middle. We'll see you next week.